All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gay Men Going Deeper podcast by the Gay Men's Brotherhood, where we talk about all things personal development, mental health, and sexuality. Today, your hosts are Michael DiIorio and Matt Landsiedel, and myself, Calan Breckon. And collectively, we have over 40 years of experience in the personal development world. And if this is your first time listening, we want to welcome you to the show. We each have our own coaching practice, but in today's podcast, we are sharing all of our best stuff. So today we are going to be talking about body representation, and we're going to be exploring questions like, what has been your experience around body representation and body image in the media? How did that translate over into your experience in the gay community? Because I think that's super important. Do you actively work on changing your relationship to media and social media and how it affects you? And what, if any, are things that you try to do to be part of the change around body representation in your own world? So those are kind of the questions we're going to be unpacking today. We'll continue these discussions on the last Thursday of every month inside the Gay Men's Brotherhood Zoom Hangout, where you'll have your chance to share your own experience, and they're always very popular. So make sure you come and check that out. This podcast and YouTube channel are listener and viewer supported. If you enjoy what we're creating, you can support us by heading on over to our Patreon page and contribute to the show. That link is in the show notes. Or you can also subscribe to the early access option on Apple Podcasts and listen ads-free and gain early access to episodes. All of your support helps us to continue making content for you and supporting our community, and we thank you in advance. Also, be sure to check out our attachment style quiz, which is in the show notes, to find out what your attachment style is. And you could get a free report on that. So that's in the show notes. And if you're looking to accelerate your personal development journey, check out our new coaching collection. Learn how to heal and empower yourself at your own pace by getting instant access to over 45 premium personal development coaching videos created by us, as well as our Healing Your Shame course and our Building Better Relationships course. You get all of that in there. Just head on over to gaymengoingdeeper.com for more information. Right. So before we jump into today's episode, I want to read a review that we have on Apple Podcasts. And if you've not already reviewed us on Apple Podcasts, go do it right now. Go to Apple Podcasts, go in there and scroll all the way to the bottom and give us a star rating, because there is thousands of you out there. And we only have, I think, like maybe 50 or 60 ratings. So it's like, come on, I know you're out there. I know you're listening. So this is what American, I want to say T. American because it's not a proper word. So T. American says, making me feel normal with 5 stars. I seriously believe that there is literally a podcast for everything. I love you guys. Taking topics that I felt I was the one of very few that felt a certain way and turning that into knowing I am not alone. Thanks, guys. Oh, you're welcome. Yay. So, all right, let's jump into today's episode. I'm very, very excited because I got opinions and I got thoughts on body representation, especially in the media, and I got a lot of experiences. So the reason we're talking about this today is because recently Sam Smith put out their music video, the Calvin Harris produced disco anthem, I'm Not Here to Make Friends. And it's very like burlesque-y. For those of you who have not like watched it yet, it's very burlesque-y. Sam wears an outfit that has like a corset and nipple, like a corset and then like nipple tassels. And I think it's like a jock strap. I love the music video personally. And Sam, who uses they them pronouns, was attacked from many sides about the video, including from like inside our own community, which speaks to a lot of things that I think we need to discuss in the community around body image and body, conversations. So I saw a comment on social media calling out naysayers in the kind of community, saying that like if Sam had been a stereotypical fit person, that all the queens would be yelling like, yes, like queen, we love you. But because Sam is a thicker person and represents a different version out of the norm in the community, people were attacking them. And so it just brought up all these things inside of me. And I was like, we need to have a conversation around this. And so we're really focusing today's conversation on the overall representation of bodies in the media. It's not just going to be the LGBTQ, it's not just going to be gay, but kind of everything and our experiences with that. And so what other notes did I have about this? Oh, I also said, if you're constantly fed only one version of what you can be, where does that leave room for everyone else? And like the majority of people is everyone else who usually don't fit into that kind of stereotype. And the same can be said for many things, but today we're just going to be focusing on the body representation, because this can go into many different categories as to like representation in many different ways. But we're just going to be focusing on the body today. So the first thing that we're going to be starting off with is, what has been your experience around body representation and body image in the media? And I think I want to go to Matt first, because I know we've talked about this kind of in a multiple episodes, but I'm really interested to hear what you have to say and your experience around this question.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as you guys know, like I've talked very openly about this on several of my interview episodes and these trio episodes as well. A lot of my conditioning and what I inherited from the media came around masculinity and muscularity. Those are the two things that I really bought hard into, and it's interesting because I've still been unpacking this around, what does it mean to me to be masculine? The muscularity stuff has significantly decreased. I haven't really worked out or been attached to that part of my nature for probably 3 years. And I grew up around this. I was very much entrenched in the culture of muscularity. And, both my parents were bodybuilders growing up. I've disclosed that before. And they were very, very into fitness. And I would go to fitness shows. I would see bodybuilders. My mom would always bring me to the gym. So I saw this growing up. And it's taken me a long time, the last 3 years, just to kind of really heal my relationship with my body and not view muscularity at the top of the chain. And it's interesting because now I see I have more love for my body now, and I feel more sexy now than I did when I was the most fit and had the most muscles, because I have learned to not identify with the images I see. And I've had to basically unfollow a lot of the pages and the accounts that I was following that were in training my brain that this is the only view of attractive. But the masculinity stuff for me is really, and they are kind of similar, I'll say, because I do still have some conditioning around masculinity, meaning stature, right? Muscle, size, these sorts of things. I see a guy that's taller to be more masculine than a guy that's not, and I see a guy that's more muscular to be more masculine than a guy who isn't. But I'm definitely shedding a lot of this conditioning, and growing up in being gay and not feeling safe, this was a very common experience for me. And I'm just coming into a lot of this awareness now around how truly unsafe I felt. And what I realize is that image and specifically muscularity and masculinity were the two things that I used to create safety for myself. So I viewed being feminine as unsafe, because I would be outed, I would be seen as gay, and then there was potential that I would get bullied or I would be a victim of violence. So I almost view my journey of developing a muscular body and being very athletic and very fit as kind of like an armor or like a protective shield around me. So then I would be considered safe amongst like heterosexual men, and then I would feel desired amongst gay men. So the desire and the safety were feeling desired and feeling safe were two of my motivators for buying into this body representation and this, how the media shows these two things that I'll say for myself, muscularity and masculinity, were the two things that are really entrenched in body representation in our community and just in the media in general. So it's taken me a long time to do this work, and I'm still on the journey, but I feel like I've done some pretty good deconditioning, I call it, around this. And I'll speak more to my journey in the other the other three questions, but I'll leave it there for now. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you brought those two things together, and you're like, this came from this side and this came from this side, and in this space I found that safety. I think a lot of people are going to resonate with that. I'm curious what you have to say, Michael.
Yeah, it's a lot of the same, right? Like masculinity is very much tied to muscularity. At least that's what the media would have us, mainstream media would have us believe for most of history. That is starting to change now in small ways. And I think that's the work that we have to do, is start to decondition that. But for me, in many ways, I do fit the stereotype today. That wasn't always the case, but I do want to acknowledge that I fit that stereotype in many, many ways in the gay community. But in my own way, I went through this in the past. So when I was a kid, going back to like elementary school and high school and even university, shorter, skinnier, not athletic at all. And so when I moved to Toronto and then became like entrenched in this gay community, thrown into this big gay community, I remember thinking at the time, like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go to the gym. Like that was the first thing, like, oh shit, like seeing all these people, like if I want a partner, if I want to be loved and seen and be part of this community, that I have to get a gym membership. Where do I do that? And so I was in my early 20s at the time. And it's literally the definition of trying to fit in. Like, oh, that's what I have to be. Here are all these people. They must be happy. They must be doing it right. I'm doing it wrong, right? That's kind of the narrative. And so I did. I ended up getting a gym membership and doing all that. Now, I will say this, my transformation has been, I still go to the gym. I love it. But the reasons for, and my not justification, but my motivation, that's what I'm looking for. My motivation is very, very much differently now. We're very different now. So for me, it's not an issue today, personally. That said, I do witness this firsthand with a lot of people in my circle. My partner, I see the effect that representation in body and race and otherwise has on him, my friends, and especially with my clients. So I think that I can certainly empathize with it, and I see the detriment that it has on our community. And it's really a shame, because the mainstream media has done a huge disservice to not just to the gay community, but to women as well, to a lot of people, because they dictate the standard for what we consider attractive and normal. Like they normalize certain bodies, right? And you could look at it as manipulation. Now, back in the day when it was like, mainstream media was like, a few networks and such, it was really that power was in the hands of a very select few who decided what was coming onto our screens, which is the era that I grew up in. I think you guys as well, right? Like you had like, I don't know, a select channels that you had on your TV, and whoever was in charge of programming got to decide what we watched and what was attractive. And so for me, that was definitely going to be, muscular, masculine, whatever that even means now, white men, and that was kind of glorified, this muscularity, everything, which it still is today. But I think the difference today is that we have social media, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that. There's pros and cons there. So yeah, I think that the damage that mainstream media has done to our community is a shame, but also I think what we're going to talk about today is how to flip that script a bit. So I'm excited to talk more about that. And how about you, Calan?
Well, I just kind of had this thought that might be like a little bit of an offshoot, but I had this thought when you were talking that, it was always the sample sizes, like, the modeling was always sample sizes on TV. Everybody was like sample size. They were always like, small, petite women and muscular men, and like bigger guys were the funny guys. They could never be like, they were not the desirable guys. They weren't the main characters. They were always like the comedians. But then I had this thought come in about how social media is taking over, and that effect that, why are people so angry about, this representation happening? And I'm wondering if it's because all the people who bought into it, who put in all that work, are now pissed off, being like, well, I had to do all this work. Why don't you have to do all this work that I had to do to like get my body into a certain way? So that just kind of popped into my mind, and I've never thought of that before, but I was like, I wonder. So just a wonder that I'm having. So my experience around body representation in the media was the same as probably, you guys. It's like sample sizes, everybody's like looks a certain way. And growing up, I also did, when I was much younger, in my kind of early 20s, I did a lot of like background work in like the TV world in Vancouver, and just all the actors, like the main actors. I remember so vividly, all the female leads were just so stick thin. Like it was like, are you okay, stick thin? Because that's what everybody sold. Everybody sold like you have to look like, to be the leading lady, you had to look a certain way. You had to be this person. And I think because it was, the select few deciding what they liked, which, is straight white men, especially back in the day, they're like, oh, I like a skinny woman. I want her to look like this. So that's what they cast. That's what they put out there. That's what everybody was told that they had to do, because that's what the desire was for that select group of people. And I think with the invention of social media, it allowed a lot of that to open up and change. And then we could see different things, and like celebrityism and representation in celebrityism has been changing, is to be like, you don't need to fit this mold. It's about the energy and the vibe you bring, and like what you're giving to different people. And that's really important. And I think that that's why we're having the conversation today, because I grew up overweight. Like I grew up, I think I mentioned this a couple of times, but I grew up, around the 200-pound mark. I was about 12, 14 when I kind of topped out in that age range, because my parents had gone through like a really messy divorce. And my dad was really unhealthy eater, and just kept crap in the house. And so that, like, I just didn't learn to eat healthy things. And like, I also wasn't modeled like, oh, you should go and work out and this and that. My dad had like the beer gut, like the Santa Claus kind of like dad bod beer gut, but like an unhealthy amount. And so that's kind of what I grew up with in my real world. But then the media was saying that I had to be this other thing, but because I didn't know the tools to change anything, I just kind of went with the flow. And of course, growing tall changed that. And moving in with my mom, when my dad kicked me out, moving in with my mom, she was like a healthy, more vegetarian based eater. And so just naturally, the age that I was, around 16, 17, like I was still in that range where my body was still developing. So like a lot of that weight did come off me naturally, because I was just eating healthier and doing more healthy things. But looking at the media, I think for me, I remember watching Queer as Folk when I was really young. And that to me was the first time that I saw us, like gay men, in the quote unquote media. And I was like, and they were all fit. Like they were all fit guys. Like not one of them was overweight in any regard. And they made fun of, what was it? It was, there was Emmett and Michael and
Justin,
the other guy, Ted.
Brian, Ted, yeah.
Ted. And like, because all of them, Justin's the twink, Brian's the god, like the beautiful god, but but Ted, they always made fun of Ted. And I was like, but he's not big at all. And I was like, and I'm like, this makes no sense to me. Like he's literally the same size as all of them. But he kind of got like that shtick in the media. And I was like, okay, so obviously gays aren't allowed to be big people. And that's right when I was going through that like large phase. And I was just like, well, I'm fucked, because like this is never going to be me. So I'm glad that now things are changing, things are shifting, but that's kind of what I saw in the media back in the day. And so now taking that, what we just kind of talked about in what we saw growing up, and leading into this next part is, how did that translate over to your experience in the gay community? I'm really interested, because this one question we could probably talk about for the entire hour. Mm-hmm. But I'll throw it to you, Matt, to start things off.
Okay. Yeah, geez. This was my Achilles heel in the gay community. I think I was very validated growing up for being attractive, and I bought in hard into that, and I struggled with low self-worth from a very young age, and I filled the void of not having intrinsic self-worth with external validation. And that was, up until probably 4 years ago. And I was addicted to, people appreciating, adoring my body, liking my photos. I would intentionally create thirst traps to get attention, that whole thing. So I really fell in hard to this. So I think, you know, the gay community, and I'm speaking of the gay community, but this happens for all human beings, in my opinion. The gay community has bought in extremely hard to your body equals your worth. Right. It's for a lot of gay men, I see this as it's very problematic. But like I said, I also see this with, I would say 30% of my male clients are heterosexual, and they struggle with the same thing. And I think where it comes from is porn, right? A lot of us as men, especially in this era, this generation, we grew up with porn being the primary influence of developing our sexuality and our relationship with our body, because, and especially if we didn't have parents that felt comfortable talking about this stuff with us. So I think that influence of seeing people in porn that have, you know, big dicks and muscular bodies, and they're tall and these sorts of things, I think that really influences how we see, and then we see people being validated and valued for that. And I think, you know, it took me a long time to do this work, to get to a place where I had to like turn off the taps of all external validation. I couldn't just do a little bit, and, you know, I had to really fully shut it off. And that was my trip to Asia. So I stopped. I wasn't on social media, really. I wasn't posting anything. I wasn't having sex. I wasn't getting any validation for my body. And that was 95% of my validation, and my worth was coming from that. So I went through a really dark period where I didn't feel worthy at all, and I didn't know how to feel worthy. And but then eventually over time, I just started to recognize, like, you know, what actual, where worth actually comes from, right, inside of myself. And it's a continuous stream of energy that's coming. And I think we block it by looking outside of ourselves, right? As soon as we take our attention, we push it outside of ourselves, we cut off the flow to that the internal validation. And so yeah, it took a lot of consciousness. And now, you know, it's interesting because there's still a part of me that's a little bit activated by this. And I think because I see the futility, and like, it's very frivolous in our culture, in the gay culture, where it activates me, because it's like, I want there to be more. I want there to be more substance in our community, you know. And I feel like, you know, seeing people constantly posting this stuff, and, you know, and other gay men falling into those thirst traps. And I don't want to say there's anything wrong with it, but if that's the only source, there's something wrong with it, right? I think it's still important to have, and I strive for 50% external and 50% internal validation, because they're both extremely beautiful. But when we have 95-5 external, internal, there's a problem, right? It means that we're thirsty for attention, and our main stream of worthiness is coming from our ego, right? From what people think about us. And it took, you know, the main motivator to doing the deep inner work that I did to get to this place is the realization that everyone else had my power, right? When I was reliant on external validation, that meant that everyone that was validating me had my power over how I felt about myself, right? That simple realization was enough fire inside me to say, fuck that. I don't want that anymore, right? I want to learn how to do it from inside myself, right? So, and now if I do post a little bit of a scandalous photo, which I like to do once in a while because it's fun, I'm not attached to getting the validation from that. Right. So there's a difference there. And I can feel it usually within our community when somebody is 100% reliant on that. And at first I was very activated by it, and I would be very judgmental. And now what I do when I see that in our community is I'll just hold my hand on my heart and I'll just send love to that person, because that's essentially what they're looking for. They're looking to feel loved and to feel seen and to feel valued. And so that's what I will do. Instead of liking the photo and dropping a bunch of, fire emojis and saying how hot you are, I'll just send them energetic love, because I really truly believe for myself, that's what I was looking for. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to be appreciated. I wanted to feel feel sexy and all these things. And there's nothing wrong with it, but there's it leads to suffering. In my opinion, it leads to suffering, because as soon as the likes stop rolling in, you need to post another picture to get more, right? It's almost like this addiction, right? So yeah.
Wow. I think that what you just, like, that whole thing, what you just said, was like so powerful and beautiful, man. Like that whole, I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of that, because I think a lot of people still live in that world where it's like this external validation is how I am seen. It's how I'm valued. It's how I know I'm alive. Am I alive? Here's a photo of me. Remind me I'm alive. And like, if I have a beautiful body, then that is going to get more of that. And so then I'm going to get validated more from that.
Totally.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, what about you?
Yeah, same. I would say there's a lot. Matt said so eloquently, my experience, having been on both sides of it. So earlier I was saying that when I first kind of came into this big gay culture mecca of Toronto, one of the first things was like, oh shit, I need to go to the gym. And I did. And I got the body, the one that we're supposed to. I'm using air quotes for people who can't see me. The thing we're supposed to look like, I did it. And exactly like Matt had said, and which we talk about very much in depth in our Healing Your Shame course. We have a whole module on this, filling that void, right? Filling the void of that external validation. So that was me. I was like, look, I did it. Here, everyone. Like, look, accept me, love me, see me, do me, all of the things. And it worked, of course. But just like Matt was saying, it put me in this like hamster wheel of like having to perpetually do that. And of course, it's exhausting. So fast forward to today, that's not where I am. Although I still love posting a good thirst trap, and I still love the external validation that comes with it, and I still do it all the fucking time because it's fun for me. But the difference is, it's like before I remember like posting it and like being glued to my phone to see like who's commenting, who's liking, how many likes is it, like just in this almost obsessive way. Whereas now it's like I posted and I just kind of like walk away. Of course, I'll check and stuff, but it's a very different energy. It's kind of like I'm doing it. Yes, of course, I love the validation. It's always nice. I'm not gonna lie about that, but it's not necessary. It's kind of like I already love myself and my body. And if you want to love it, great. I accept your love too, but I don't need it to already love it. Like it's already there for me. And that's been the work. It's not been easy. It's taken me a long time to get there. A lot of self-worth work, and realizing exactly like what we said, your worth is not attached to your body at all. It's also not attached to your income or your status or your relationship or anything like that. It's nothing external. It's always internal. But we get caught up in all of these different stories, and body in the gay community is definitely one of the probably the biggest one that we attach our worth to. So again, not to say that all of these things are bad. I mean, like posting the thirst traps, right? Like it can be fun. I enjoy it. Anyone who follows me on my social knows that I do it often, and I also get a lot of hate for that too, right? Like, shouldn't I be? What do people say? Like, oh, shouldn't I know better than to do that? And I'm triggering people. I'm like, yes, let yourself be triggered by all means, please do. I invite you to be triggered by my content, please. So yeah, but it is different, and I can only do that now from the work that I've done in realizing that Michael the man, the person, the human, is different than Michael the body, and my body's going to change, and all of our bodies change, right? They all transform. I'm aging. Like I'm turning 40 this year, and one of the things I'm seeing already. Not that 40 is old, by the way. 40 is very young, in my opinion. But in our culture, 30 is seen as what do they call it? Gay death. That's ridiculous, but I don't believe that at all.
So stupid.
I know, right? And now 40 is gay death, and I'm sure it's going to be 50 one day. But what I am noticing is, I do see this. Before, when I was younger, I always heard that, oh yeah, gay culture is obsessed with youth, right? Muscular bodies, youthful bodies. And already I'm starting to be like, there is something to that. And I'm not even old, but I can already see it. I can already sense it. But it's there. So I guess my experience with the gay community in this particular topic has been like the full spectrum of it, like doing it with going to the spectrum, like 95 to 100% validation to now more 50-50. But hey, you know what? I don't want to lie to anyone. Like I fucking love it. Like you post something, you look good. I feel good in my body. I'm like, look how great, I feel good about this. And for some people, it's going to come across as very, I don't know, arrogant or vain. And I think that in and of itself is its own story that you need to look at, right? Like, why is that triggering you? Maybe there's some work there to do as well. And again, to say that not everyone who's posting their selfies at the gym is someone who has insecurity or low self-worth. I was like that person who was deeply, deeply insecure, and that's why I was doing it. But now, I'm not to say that I don't have insecurities. I do. I'm human, but it's not at the same level. And there's this, I think my biggest learning has been that I found a pretty good balance with it. Like I like where I'm at with it. Like I'm in a good place and I feel good about it. Not that I'm like perfect and cured and I have 100% self-worth all the time and all these things. I don't want to like mislead you. I have my moments, of course, but I can bring myself back and I know the motivations and intentions, if that makes any sense.
Wow. Yeah. It's very interesting listening to your guys' story, because like I have like I feel like I have such a different story of it, because I did grow up like super overweight and like heavy. And so my experience in the gay community was just like, oh, well, I'm never going to have any of that. Like, that's just not obtainable. And I was very ugly duckling syndrome, like this fat ginger kid who everybody made fun of. And so I carried a lot of that as I continued to grow up. And then when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s, I did have the growth spurt. So that I did get taller. That helped. Moving in with my mom, eating healthy, that helped. But I never felt like I could go to the gym. Like I was just like, oh, that's like gone and past. Like I can't do that. That's not a part of me. I'm not welcome there. I don't belong there. Because I thought like there was this mentality of like, oh, you have to be a certain person to go, or you have to act a certain way to go, or like I just didn't feel comfortable. And eventually in my 20s, I did have a friend and she was a bodybuilder. But she wasn't ripped or anything crazy. And she was just lovely and bubbly. And we met through mutual friends. And I like kind of mentioned I wanted to go. And so she's like, oh, I'll take you. And it was one of these like industrial gyms, because I grew up in the suburbs. So it was one of these industrial gyms, like in the like construction-y like warehouse area. So it was like huge and it wasn't very busy. And I felt like safe to like do things there. And so I finally started going to the gym, and I was doing it for me because I didn't want anybody to see me. But eventually I was doing it for like vanity reasons. And so I did lose enough weight, but I could never quite lose. Like I always had that baby fat over my stomach. Like I never, ever had abs. Like there's always been a blanket over it. And finally it got to this one point where I did this contest, like this gay contest for modeling in the Vancouver gay community. And I ended up winning. And that was like, on one hand, a huge boost to me of being like, I finally did it. And the first thing the contract manager said to me, who was signing me to the modeling agency, the first thing he said was like, oh, but we can't send you anywhere until you get abs. That was the first thing. And I had just worked like the last 2 to 3 years working on this. And so that just like, I like crumbled. I was like, fuck it. I like it. I'm never going to fit that picture. That's never going to be me. And I just let it all go. I just said, fuck it. I'm not going to try anymore, because if I get to where I think I'm good and I'm still not good enough, then fuck it. And so I stopped going to the gym. I was like, never again. This isn't for me. I was doing this for all the wrong reasons, because I had bought into that gay community, that gay world. And then fast forward like a few more years into kind of like my mid to late 20s, and I kind of really discovered the bear community, and like my whole world just changed. And talking about like porn earlier with Matt, what you said, it was so different of like, oh, these bodies are celebrated in a totally different way. And I started exploring there, and I just found like this camaraderie and this love that people had. And there was all sorts of shapes and sizes. And I was like, why can't the whole community be like this? Like, why can't all the community be like the bear community, where it's like, there's all shapes and sizes, but like everybody's celebrated, everybody's beautiful, and everybody just likes to have a good time. And it really blew my mind. And until I found that world, I had just kind of given up on myself. I was just like, whatever. Like, I've never had abs. I've never had big muscles. I've never had any of this. The only thing that I did have was my height. And so even still now today, I don't like, I don't believe people are looking at me. Like, I've never had that validation. I've never had people looking at me and me thinking, oh, I'm being validated for how I look or my body. That's never crosses my mind. That's never my first instinct. And so it's interesting to hear your story, Matt, of like how that was how you got that validation and that's how you built that. Because I had the opposite of like, oh, that's never going to be how it happens. So now when it does happen, it's like I have blinders on and I can't see it. Like, I remember going out to the bar and my friend being like, everybody's looking at you. And I was like, no, they're not. Like, you're crazy. And it's so ingrained in me because of my youth and my childhood that it's just like, you're crazy. This is impossible. And so I can understand how people can get into that world where it's just like, no matter what you do, you never think you're going to be there because it's all up here. And like, I still actively work on it because it's a journey and it's a process. And I don't think I'm ever going to be that ripped guy or go and like have the big muscles. Maybe I'll reserve that for like my late daddy years. So like moving into my 50s or something, I'll be like, I'll go on that journey. But you know, growing up and looking at, you know, queer as folk and these other things and being like, oh, well, I guess I don't fit in there. Not to mention like how this portrays in so many other parts of our community, like the, you know, the BIPOC community and their experience. Like, we're coming from obviously like a white standpoint of like what we saw. So I can only imagine other people's, but this is, you know, been our journeys and our stories. But it's just, it excites me now to see people like Sam Smith. And that's why I want to do this episode. It excites me to see that, and that they're just out there living their best life and being like, fuck y'all, I'm going to do me and I'm going to change. And I think that social media gave the people, the general population, the power to say, we don't want to see just this. There's a space for everything and everyone, but we want to see what we've not seen, because the real world, the out there world, is so magically, beautifully different and comes in all shapes and sizes across the spectrum, that I think finally being able to see that, people are going, yes, I want this. And that's why it's gaining the traction. And this is where I come back to that thought I had earlier of like, but this pushback, this anger is still there, of people being like, how dare you? And that's what I'm really curious about, is to like, where is that coming from? Like, why is like, you know, why is Sam Smith getting shamed? But if Lizzo were to go out there, and this is still new, like Lizzo couldn't have done this ages ago, but if Lizzo did the same thing, she would be like yes all over the place and be like, yeah, they're amazing. But Sam Smith, and it's just like, is there this internal gay male energy where it's just like, oh no, this is the unacceptable thing. We've accepted these other things over here, but this we draw the line at. Why can't we celebrate that? So yeah, I just went on a big tangent there. But I'm interested. I am interested in that. But we'll move on to the next question of, do you actively work at changing your relationship to media and social media and how it affects you? And Matt, I know you were saying that like you had to do a big pullback. So I'm curious as to like what exactly you did.
Yeah, that's the work. I really think that's the work of the deconditioning, because most of us are trying to change our body instead of changing our relationship to the things that are telling us to change our body. And, you know, when you're talking, actually throughout this whole episode, I'm having like waves of emotion. Like I feel like crying, and it's the same emotion that I was feeling like a year ago when we talked about this. And it came up also in my episode with, on talking about pretty privilege. And it just, there's a lot of sadness around this for me. And I think it's still lingering in my body, clearly, because it's bringing up emotional responses. And there's a lot of sadness around the fact that as human beings, we bully our bodies, right? We use our minds to bully our bodies, because it's like, when was the last time you checked in with your body to ask if your body wanted to look this way, or if your body wanted to go to the gym, right? It's like, it's a mental construct that we attach to, that we think we have to be a certain way. And even with sex, right? Engaging in sex, how many times do we do things because our mind thinks it would be hot to do it, but then when you're doing it, your body's like screaming at you to stop doing it because it doesn't feel good, right? Or something. Like, there's always this kind of this inner conflict, and that's where the sadness is coming from within me. It's constantly trying to change our body is a form of bullying, right? And, a lot of personal trainers out there, and I was one of them, would disagree with that. They'd be like, no, it's not good to be overweight, or it's not healthy, or it's not this, or it's not that, and all this stuff. But I'm like, if you're happy and you feel good in your body, then celebrate that, and the same thing for women. I know we have some female audience. I'll speak to them. It's like constantly wearing makeup and having to doll yourself up and look perfect all the time. What message is that sending to your natural face, right? That your natural face isn't good enough to be presented to the world. So these sorts of things are really important for us to be exploring. And but I'll speak more, to the actual question about changing the relationship to media or social media. I think I'll share with you guys what I did, and that helped me. And I would say this was probably the second hardest transformation I've ever had to do in my life, was change this relationship to my body. The first hardest transformation being codependency. That was the hardest transformation I've ever had to make. But one of the things that I had to get really clear about was the intention behind why I'm posting. And that took a lot of self-honesty, right? Like, why am I posting these thirsty pictures, or why am I posting this picture? Get honest with yourself. If you still want to post it after you realize that you're posting it to get attention, go hard, but at least you're being honest with yourself and you have awareness around it, because then you can start to change the behavior. I stopped following all and any accounts that were glorifying one specific type of body, which was muscular, white, tall, like these sorts of things. I stopped following all of them, and actually any account that was promoting that solely. Like, I'm very sex positive, but if there's an account that's only posting thirsty photos, I don't think that's wholesome, right? Because there's all aspects of our being. Physical just happens to be one of them. But I've run into some issues with this, because when I open my account on my personal Instagram, it's inundated with this. And I don't follow any of these accounts. So there must be an algorithm that is showing that I'm a gay man and that this is what I want to see because I fit into that category. Right. So that's media working against us, using the algorithm of who we are, because our community is obsessed with this stuff. So I get lumped into it. Right. So I actually don't go through my search thing on that page, because it's just not what I want. Right. And yes, I find these guys attractive, and sometimes I'll jerk off to them and whatever, but I don't want that to be the predominant experience that I have when I open my socials. Right. So that's one of them. I had to take time away. So when I say I went to Asia and I took a year away, like, I really mean it. Like, I didn't engage in any of this stuff. I took some time to reset everything, because as we know, human beings psychologically, when we're in habitual patterns of conditioning, we need to remove ourselves from the environment, from the stimulus, from all these things in order to be able to make behavior change. So taking time away from these things was really important. So that meant I stopped watching porn. And that was actually a beautiful transformation for me, because since I was younger, I was overly governed by my visual sense, and I'm very visually governed anyway. So I started to realize that I could only come to orgasm if I had either a visual to look at, or I was fantasizing in my mind and creating visual, which means that I wasn't embodied, right? I was very mentally governed sexually. So I had to learn how to become embodied and feel pleasure in my body, right? And so I started practicing things like masturbating to the sensation of masturbation, and to being within my body energetically, which was really hard at first. Like, I couldn't do it at first. I was like, this feels weird. And I would always default back into porn or images. So that helped me a lot, limiting my porn watching. And I don't say that I don't watch porn. I'll maybe watch it once every 2 weeks. And that's a treat for me, kind of thing. But I find it has a very toxic impact on me personally. I'm not speaking for other people, but so I try my best not to engage with it. And the last thing I'll say here is placing more value on the other aspects of who we are. So, you look at the 4 containers of the human being. We have the spiritual, we have the mental, we have the emotional, we have the physical. So if we're overdoing in one area, the other areas will will be impacted, right? So if we're governed 90% by our physical, then, you know, these other parts of our nature don't get valued and validated. So I started to try my best to lead with things, and I would communicate to men that were objectifying me or sending me, you know, things where it would just be about my body. I would say things like, you know, it would feel nice to be valued or validated for the creations I put into the world, like my work, you know what I mean? These sorts of things. And just setting that boundary, like, I don't want to be objectified just for my body, because there's other aspects to me. And then what happened was that I started to respect my own boundary, and I started to see that in others. All right. And I started to value people based on their energy and their brain, right? Like, being a sapiosexual and a demisexual, like, I am aroused by someone's ideas and brain and who they are emotionally and heart-centered and these sorts of things. So, but I wasn't always that way, or at least I wasn't leading with that. So this work that I'm describing that I did, and using some of these tips, they actually helped me become more sexually and spiritually mature, because I wasn't overdoing in this one area. I created, I guess, wholesomeness in all four chambers of who I am and who I identify other people to be as well. So, and I think that's important to note, because it's like, we can only really see in others what we've become to see in ourselves. So if I'm not actually noticing how beautiful my emotional and my intellectual and my spiritual self is, it's going to be really hard for me to notice that in other people too, right? So I had to learn how to stop putting so much emphasis on my body and put it into these other domains as well. And then it allowed me to also put that emphasis on other people. So yeah, this was a challenging one for me. And it was quite an emotional journey moving through a lot of this stuff. There was a lot of grieving and a lot of forgiveness, because I was a big fat bully to my body. Like, it was unbelievable. Like, and I still can be like that. I can still fall into that place. And it stems from shame. It stems from perfectionism, which is an extension of shame. And, but yeah, now I can say that I've really learned how to love my body in all of its forms. Yeah.
Nice. That's beautiful, Matt. Thanks.
Yeah,
and
thank
thanks
you.
for those like practical tips, like the real world, what you did to help you. So Michael, what about you? What journey have you gone on in regards to like your social media?
Yeah. So first, something Matt said that I want to talk about, which was interesting. I resonate a lot with that, Matt. I think it's interesting because I have gone through a similar journey where now I do love my body. And the way I like to think about it, when people do objectify me, and I've said on this podcast before, I like being objectified. So I'm a little bit different than you guys. But I'll say this. I think of it as like, if you're going to objectify me for like anything about my appearance, not just my body, then like you're only getting a quarter of what I'm all about. And that's on you, right? Like, if you want to take only the quarter and walk away, fine. But like, if you stay, you're going to get a much more complex, deep, interesting, colorful, fun experience, which is, you know, I use 25% going back to your quarters, right? The emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, because I am, you know, all of those things. And I think it's interesting that I think a lot of guys will judge. Let's look at it like the analogy of a book, right? The book, the appearance is the cover of the book. Does it have a pretty cover? Does it have a nice title? And then you could just look at it and not open the book. But like with me and with a lot of people out there, there is so much more in the book. It's not just the cover, right? So that's the way I like to think about it. And then coming from the place of loving your body, it's interesting. I'll post those kinds of photos because I love my body, but people will say, oh no, you must hate your body. You must be so insecure and so vain. So like that's why I tell these people, like, I'll never win. Either I don't post it at all, or I do, and then I'm being vain and insecure. So like, where is the, like, where do you find the balance? So I like to go at it with peeps on my Instagram. Anyway, let me answer the question.
That's just like the Kelly Clarkson song just came to my head. Have you heard the one where she sings all the things like, if you're this, you can't be that. If you can't win. I think it's like that just reminded me of that. I was like, yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah. I post a half naked selfie and it's because I hate myself. I'm like, actually, no, it's because I love my body and I'm proud of it. Okay. So let's talk about social media. This is perfect. Good segue. So yes, the answer is I do very, very much actively manage how I manage that relationship. So we all know, we've done podcasts about it, that social media is a problem in many ways. It has a deep harming impact. It can have a deep harming impact to a lot of people, especially in this particular topic, appearances and body positivity. However, I'm not gonna. I think it's easy. We can have many conversations shitting all over social media about how it's bad, but I have a feeling it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm sure how we use it will change, and I'm sure the different platforms will change, which is a good thing. But until then, I advocate fully for taking 100% responsibility for how I use it. Right. And so that could be, what that looks like is lots of different things. Matt had a great example of a cleanse. I regularly do a cleanse. In fact, now these days, I don't really just follow people willy-nilly. Like I'll take a good look at their page and say like, yeah, okay, does this vibe with me? If so, then I'll follow. I don't just follow blindly. I don't do follow for follow. I don't believe in that. Another thing I'll do is if I'm scrolling, I'm just kind of scrolling through and there's something that doesn't feel good to me, I'll notice that. Like, oh, this doesn't feel good. And if that's the case, then I'll stop following it after, a while, because I'm like, yeah, kind of like Matt was saying, if it's all one type of not just body, but even just one message, like I don't know, I'm a Gemini, you gotta get me on all kinds of levels here. But if it's just like really flat surface level, one message one way or another, then I find it boring for me personally. So off it goes. So yeah, that's something that I like to do. And I also believe in not policing what people post, because this goes against my value of like sovereignty. I think people have the right to post what the fuck they want. Leave them alone. You don't have to follow them. Unfollow, right? Just off you go. Now, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that what people post is correct. There's a lot of hate out there. Again, I'm not here to like say everyone on social media is doing the right thing. There's a lot of trash shit out there, in my opinion, and they are doing it wrong, in my opinion. But my options are I can go wrestle them to the ground and make them stop, which historically for me has never worked. Or I could just avert my eyes elsewhere and give my attention, my focus, my social media viewing, real estate to things that do matter and accounts that are more aligned with me or more body positive. And I want to say this as well, when it comes to social media, one thing that I have to remind myself when I'm kind of going through and I'm slipping into that, I'll look at that body, whatever it is, I'm going to say, I don't know this statistic for real, so this is just shooting off the top of my head. I'm going to say like 90% of these are enhanced images. They are not an accurate representation of the truth. If it's not a filter, which we all use filters, if it's not that, then it's like there are so many AI apps and apps that make you look skinnier, make you look younger, take away your lines, take away your blemishes. Like they are out there. So what we're looking at is not real. It's an illusion, right? So the sooner I remind myself of that, like what I'm looking at is not a real thing here. This is just I'm looking at illusion, and then I'm using that illusion to weaponize as a weapon against myself. Like, what am I doing, right? Like I just kind of have to constantly remind myself this isn't real. Even if it's pretty, I can say, hey, this is really, good job on this artwork. Like I'll call that artwork, because it's not necessarily a picture of someone who just woke up without a filter, snapped it and posted on there. Again, I'm going to say that's most of the case. And then another topic or another thing for social media, which I think after listening to you guys talk, I might change my mind on this a bit, but I was saying that it has helped democratize what we find attractive, whereas before it was, studio executives who got to decide. Now anyone and everyone is a content creator. However, we are now at the, I guess now we're stuck working against an algorithm, to Matt's example, right? So Matt doesn't follow any of that, but Instagram has decided what Matt wants to see and what I want to see and what you want to see. And now that's the issue. Now we're fighting against that. Back in the day when Instagram was, fresh and new, it was probably more, democratic in that whatever you posted, I think back in the day it was the earliest post was the one on top and that's it. You didn't get to use hashtags, right? So, but the case is still that anyone can be a creator. And so that's why I think it's important to actively go through your social media, remove things that don't make you feel good, remove things that aren't aligned with who you are, and actively seek out hashtags like body positivity, plus size, bears, whatever it is that either represents you or that you find attractive. Go and do that. I think there's a lot of work here to do in the community. And I think we've really just scratched the surface. And I hope that in 5-10 years, things are going to be a lot different. We got a ways to go, but hopefully this podcast helps too.
Yeah. I like that. Thanks. You guys both had a lot of really great stuff to share, and I'm going to add to it because I have some things that go along the lines of that in regards to like social media. Is I can't remember when I did this, but I made a point of it. I think I mentioned it before, to actively curate my social media, not just for what I like to look at and watch, but also just like for my own mental health reasons. I think it was probably early pandemic where I was just like, this is not good. Like, this is not making me feel good. And if I don't feel good, what's the point of doing this? And my whole belief was like, I want to feel good when I do take the time to sit on Instagram. I want to feel good when I'm on Instagram, because like that's what that's for me. It's a fun leisure thing. I don't want it to like make me feel bad, but a lot of people, it makes them feel bad because they're looking at things that they don't have, longing for it, and that makes them feel sad instead of watching like, silly husky videos. So what I did, because I was like, you Matt, like all there is on the discovery page was just like guys with ripped abs. And I'm like, I don't even like guys with ripped abs. Like, I don't like them. But and I had this in my opener, but if you're fed something over and over and over and over and over again, it kind of just ingrains in there. And you're like, okay, well then you start liking one, or you start liking this, or one pops up. Like, chances are, and then it just becomes this whole fulfilling cycle because the algorithm just keeps giving it to you. So you really have to make that conscious effort to go on and unfollow all the accounts that make you feel sad or bad about yourself, follow accounts that make you feel good about yourself, and then also like a bunch of photos that are completely different. I remember I went on this like husky binge because they're just like wild dogs and they talk a lot. And I liked a couple photos, and I saw on my algorithm, all of a sudden I was getting fed these videos. And so it's like, okay, so I need to actively curate what I want to see. And I can't just aimlessly scroll and kind of like things. And so that's what I've been doing like for the past couple of years, is like really focusing on like what I want to see and what I want to have represented in my feed. And like it's like, it's so crazy and stupid because it's like, I like bigger, huskier, thicker guys, yet I'm not allowed to be that in my head. And I'm like, why do I have this belief inside of myself that it's like, I find this so attractive, but I'm not allowed to be that because that's what the world tells me, or that's what I've been fed, and that's what's ingrained in my mind. And so I've gone and like found like those Instagram accounts of like the bigger guys who are like representing, or the bigger people, and like people that I find not just aesthetically pleasing, but like they have like something to say. They're funny. It's not just the same selfie again and again and again and again and again, because that gets so boring so quickly. But like they have a comedy thing, or they have like whatever it is gets added to it, but that takes conscious effort to do. And so that's one of the things that I do to actively work on, my relationship to social media. I don't watch any like news or any kind of like aimless TV or anything like that. I'm very specific and conscious about what I watch and what I consume. And then one of the other things that, kind of came to my mind while this conversation was going on is that, there's also this mentality or this belief system that it's like, oh, if you just eat right and you go to the gym, you'll lose a lot of weight and you'll look a lot better. And maybe that's true. But I also want to challenge that, because there is a lot of science coming out around the study of the gut and the like microbiota that live inside of us, where the programming that they have might be that you cannot lose weight, that you are a heavy person. And here's an example. There was this, not so much a study, but this woman had a condition called C. diff, and she needed to have what they call a fecal microbial transplant. And so they needed somebody's healthy, poop to like put in her so that she wouldn't die. And so they used the daughter because it was like, genetically, they're like, oh, this is the closest thing genetically. And so they did it, but the daughter was overweight, like pretty overweight. And the mom who got it ended up gaining within the next couple of weeks over 40 pounds. And so it brought about these questions of not only is eating healthy and doing these things, but what microbes are living inside of you and what are they programmed to do? And so it's not just, oh, go to the gym. Like, why can't this large person just go to the gym and get healthier? Because that's not the whole story. That's what we've been sold. And that might be the picture that's been painted for us, but that's not the whole truth. And it made me feel better about when I had gone to the gym and I fucking worked my ass off to have abs, and just nothing I did ever got me there. And I could feel them. I was like, these things are strong as fuck. Like, I can feel them, but they always have like a thick blanket over them. And that's just the way my body is, because that's the microbes that I have inside of me that they're like, no, this is what we need to survive. And that, like, you know, we're just starting to jump into that science. So I just wanted to put that out there into all the listeners, that it's not just like, oh, well, if you just change this one thing or that thing, it doesn't work for everybody. Your personal story doesn't mean it can be the same for everybody around there. So going back to the question, do you actually work on changing your relationship with media and social media, how it affects you? Yes, I'm always constantly actively curating my feeds. I don't go on apps that make me feel bad. Like, I've completely left Twitter because that's just a troll fest and just like horrible people saying horrible things. I really do think that there should be, as much as I don't want, you know, overstepping, I really do think that it's like places online where you have to prove who you are and be who you are will create a safer space, because trolls are only trolls because they can hide behind a keyboard and they have 3 followers and they can say whatever the fuck they want. But words still hurt, and that kind of shit still hurts, right? And so I feel like if we had a space where you have to be yourself, people are going to be less likely to say those awful things, because there will be repercussions, as there should be. Don't be a shitty person. All right, so we're moving into our last thing here is, what, if any, are the things that you try to do to be a part of the change around body representation, and what have you tried to work on to actively shift these things, not only in your life but in the outside world, so that we can make that change? So Matt, how about you kick things off?
Okay. I want to just say something about what you said about how you don't like you guys with abs. It's really interesting because I hear that quite a bit, and it's I kind of feel similar, actually. And I've had an interesting I've had sex with very, very fit guys, and I've had sex with guys that aren't as fit, and I've noticed that it actually feels better, like in the actual act of sex, to have more, it's softer, right? A guy that has like ripped pecs, ripped abs, and a lot of muscle, like, it's hard, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
it doesn't feel good, like, to have a hard body pushing up against you. So it's
more
just interesting.
For the pushing.
More cushion for the pushing. Yeah. But I will say, and I will expose myself a bit here, because I do believe in sharing, you know, the parts of us that maybe have preference. And but I want to first, before I share that, is say that I see a very distinct difference between preference and prejudice, and one definitely can lead into the other, but not all the time. I think it's very normal and natural for human beings to have preferences, and I do prefer guys that are leaner. Like, I'm not attracted to overweight men, and I feel like the more and more work that I do, though, on exposing my unconscious biases, which is what we're talking about today, like how media has impacted our brain and conditioned us to believe certain things, the more and more that I challenge that, the more and more I start to focus on the other areas, right? The physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. They all get included in. But I also I don't want to like come across today like I'm like some perfect person who's accepting of all people and I love all people and I'm attracted to all people. That's not the case. I have preferences, and it's very important for me to have those preferences and own them and know what I want and know what turns me on. However, I will say I've had to get very clear with myself and do a lot of deconditioning and focus on a lot of my unconscious biases. What is informing my preferences? Where is that coming from? And that involves age, body type, race. It involves all of these things, right? And I think it's really important to understand the intention behind why you prefer certain things. And then you might recognize in your preferences there might be prejudice present, right? And that's what you want to start to work with. So I wanted to just say that. So and I will say that over identifying with the physical, we come from a community that is obsessed with age, right? And as you said, and I'll say obsessed with youth. And I think it's really important to recognize where that comes from. And it comes from an over-identification with the physical, right? And I one of the other motivators, other than people having my power, of why I wanted to do this work is because I don't want to become a mature adult in my older years and then have to start doing this work when it's forced upon me, right? As my body changes, I don't want that. I want to do it now. I want to learn how to value each quadrant of who I am now. And I think that's the important part of this work, because I really think that over-identifying with the physical is a major contributor to ageism in our community. Right? We see somebody that their body, or they have wrinkles, or they have gray hair, or whatever it might be, and we undervalue that because it's like we've attributed that to being a decreasing attractiveness. But it's just a story, right? It's a story that we've told, that we've bought into because we've over-identified with the physical, right? So I've had to learn how to love the energy as well as the body, right? The energy of who we are, the soul nature of who we are, it inhabits the body, right? But the body isn't everything. And when I was hardcore into fitness and I was projecting all this stuff on everybody else, I had a hard time seeing people that weren't conventionally attractive as attractive for that exact reason. Right. And then I again, doing a lot of this work and understanding demisexuality and working with energy, now I feel like I have more of an equal placement on what I find attractive. Like, I'm really drawn to people's energy, and I'm not going after guys that are conventionally attractive anymore. It's like, if he happens to be conventionally attractive and his soul energy is so beautiful, great, right? But I don't put all the chips in that one place anymore. So and then some practical tips for people, like, stop putting attractive people on pedestals. Right? Like, stop it. Stop putting white people on pedestals, right? If you're a person of color, it's like, stop putting white, ripped, ab dominant people on pedestals. And that's the work we need to do. You can't expect the person who's put on the pedestal to jump off the pedestal. Who wouldn't want to be put on a pedestal? Right? It's you, the person that is putting them on the pedestal, that needs to reclaim that power, right? And take that back. And I think that's the work that our community needs to do. We need to stop giving power to people who haven't earned it, other than their parents creating them and giving them attractiveness, right? Like, there's not a lot of merit to that, to someone being attractive. Like, you didn't do anything to earn that, right? So why are we putting that so much on a pedestal? So something to think about.
Sorry, I want to also just say to that, yes, but we also don't need to do it in a mean or negative way.
Oh, 100%.
That's what I see sometimes, is that it's like, it's the pendulum swings, and it's like in a negative anger way. It's like, no, you just can unfollow. Exactly. Quit. Just quiet quit.
I fully agree. But I will say that's the birthplace of change. You look at human beings, and it's like, we have to get feisty sometimes, and our shadow has to come out in order for us to be convicted in our truth. And that's just highlighting that we don't quite feel convicted in our truth. So we need to amplify it with anger and aggression and fire. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it will eventually lead to that. But I do agree with you. If you have the consciousness to be able to lead with more tact and kindness, then go for that approach. It's always going to lead to better things. But what else do I have here? Yeah. And again, intention behind your participation in thirst traps. Right? Like, why are you commenting on this person's thirst trap? Like, are you looking to get their attention so that they'll reach out to you and you guys can have some sort of connection? Well, maybe you just DM them instead, right? Instead of just giving them external validation. Or so again, always looking at the intention behind your behavior. Why am I doing this? And what sort of impact is me doing this going to have on the person who's receiving this from me, right? And I'm not saying it's always going to be wrong, because as we've highlighted in this episode, like, it's amazing feeling desired and attractive and sexy. Like that's a good feeling. So we don't want to rob someone of that experience, but we want to get clear about the intention of why we're doing something. I just think it'll lead to better awareness of self, and that might be part of reclaiming the power of putting people on pedestals. It's like, okay, well, I'm not just going to give this person the ego praise or the attention that they're seeking. I'm going to make, I'm going to encourage them to go inside and do the work, right, to feel worthy. So, but it's a tricky space, right? It's very gray. This is a gray space we're talking about here. So it's going to be discernment in each moment, as opposed to just making blanket statements and placing that over top. You can't really do it like that. Everything's so intricate and dynamic in the space we're talking about today. But yeah.
Yeah, I loved all those. Those were really great, Matt. Thanks for bringing up a lot of stuff. In that last little bit. Michael, what says you?
Yeah. Adding to that, I think what we see, guys, is in our Facebook group, the Gay Men's Brotherhood Facebook group, we see this play out when people post their intro photos. Right. So I think
people lose their mind.
Right. Like people, it's very triggering for a lot of people. So what happens is, I think it's not necessarily just about taking people off a pedestal, if that's what you want to use, but it's more so about like giving the appreciation and acknowledgement to more people or different people. Right. Because what happens is hot, using air quotes for the listeners, hot people show up young. You can see that they have some kind of muscle, whatever. They get like all the likes. Oh, hi, welcome. That's all good. And then like other guy shows up who's not that. And there's a few welcome likes and all these things, right? And then, but it just goes to show that, watch who you're commenting on. I'm not saying don't comment on the first guy and yes, comment on the second guy, but like say hi to both. Like, why are we choosing one but not the other, right?
I will add to this because, like you said earlier, Michael, a lot of this behind the scenes is also the algorithm, because Facebook knows this person gets traction and it wants to keep you on the platform. So it feeds you that young, attractive person so that you will communicate and like it. And the other person just doesn't get fed into the algorithm. So it's not even just sometimes, it's like sometimes it is going out of your way to look at the other photos, to engage with those, and not just the ones you've been fed on your feed. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's exactly right. It's an active, everything that we're talking about here requires activity and intention on your part. It's not just going to happen. Change just doesn't happen on its own. You got to really think that your eyes and your clicks have power. And when you can own that power, then you can start to divvy it up the way that is maybe more fair. I want to just say that. So now to the question, what are the things that I try to do to be part of the change here? So there's two. One is maybe more indirect and one is extremely direct, but I take my role as a content creator very seriously. I take a lot of responsibility for that, even though it doesn't always seem like it, I'm sure. So in my marketing, when I started my business, I made a very, very deliberate choice that I was going to use a diverse range of images in my marketing, not just with body, but even with age and race as well. So if you follow any of my work, you'll see that I include people of color, different body types, different ages in any of my marketing materials, my workbooks and whatnot. And I'll say this as well. When I first started, it was very hard to find that. Like I would spend a very long time looking for images purposefully, intentionally, of like two non-white, like a non-white gay couple, like just where both of them are not white, where they're happy and in love. Like, can we find some of that? I'm looking for some stock photos here. Very, very hard to find. Now these days, it's quite a bit easier. So I will say there has been progress, and I'm happy to see that. So that's the indirect way. The direct way is, this is exactly what I teach and coach as a teacher, facilitator, coach. So I currently am doing the Sexual Empowerment 101 workshops. And literally module 1 or workshop 1 is about conditioning. And workshop 2 is about body positivity and how to feel sexy in your body. And so the whole purpose, there's six altogether, but the whole purpose of these first 2 is finding and learning all of these conditions that we have and exposing them, not judging them or shaming them, but just exposing them so we can see them. And then learning that sometimes you have to value yourself, the parts of your body, your appearance that the mainstream media doesn't. You have to kind of find that within yourself first. And it's all about learning that, of course, at the very top of it is that self-esteem does not come from your body parts, which is kind of what we talked about here. So, in those groups, we talk about our experiences. We actually, the activity for that module is to do a social media cleanse. So I have everyone go do that. And then what I have them do is come back to the group and bring one body positive or sex positive social media account. So they have to go out and actively search for it and then bring it to the group. And so by the end of that workshop, we all have 15 more or 15 new accounts that we could follow if we so choose. So, we also do a sexy selfie exercise, which is a lot of fun for some people, but it's also very triggering for others. And the point of that is not to take like a half naked sexy selfie, although you can if you want. But the point of that is to reframe what sexy means to you, right? Like, sure, it could be that like half naked guy. That's fine. I'm not saying no to that. But for me, it could also be, as an example, there's nothing I find sexier than a guy reading a book, especially these days when I see most people just doing this. But if I see a guy reading a book, I'm just like, babe, babe magnet. I don't care what he's reading. He's reading with his eyeballs, not on a phone alone. Like, oh my God, I'm just like smitten. So that to me is an example of something I find sexy that the mainstream media would not necessarily portray sexy. So again, the point of these exercises is to redefine that and then share a sexy selfie. So that is the very, very direct way that I'm contributing. And I would say you guys as well, with this podcast and our group and everything that we do in our courses, Healing Your Shame. We talk a lot about this, building better relationships, and all of the awesome content in our coaching collection. So I think we are all very directly contributing to that, but there's a lot more to be done. And I will say as well, like, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning as I go as well.
Oh, I love these, you guys. This has been such a good, spicy little episode. I'm like, I like the feistiness that we've had. I really like the things that you just shared, Michael. And we did. I remember when we started the GMB, we very consciously, actively were like in the rules, like no shirtless selfies, no sexy beach kind of Speedo selfies, because we didn't want the default to be go to where you're comfortable, which is sexually objectifying gay men. We wanted to get into the deeper parts. And it's like, if you want to post a selfie, great, but you have to be wearing your shirt. It can't, and people fought against that and pushed against that. And like, true,
which
yeah, we don't want like, but it's like, but because of what we're trying to create, we need to go far over here first before we can explore those other parts, because that's the easy part for you, which is why you want to go there. So yeah, it's doing those little things that makes the difference. For me, I don't necessarily do any big things, I would say. I kind of just do it in my everyday, like, I support Sam Smith, love Sam Smith, and all the people that I see that I love, I make a point to yell louder, like yell louder about loving Lizzo, yell louder about loving Sam Smith. Yell louder about these people that I want to celebrate and these different shapes and bodies that I want to celebrate. And little things like I had this interaction where there's something called the Red Hot 100. Do you guys know what that is? Where it's the redheaded guys and they have like a redheaded calendar and it's all okay. So it's been around for a number of years, and I can't remember this guy who created it, but he's a redhead as well. And so he wanted to create sexiness from redheads, because it was like growing up, it was like Kick a Ginger Day, and we were like soulless, and like it was always that kind of thing that came along with being a redhead, especially like over in Europe. It's very different, as well. And so he created this Red Hot 100, which is basically gay men, because I think he's gay. And it's all like ripped, sexy gingers, but it was to like sexify redheads. So people were like, yes, we can be sexy too. But now that that's been going on for such a long time, they're doing another casting over in Europe. And my friend sent me the thing. He's like, oh, you should do this. I was like, girl, I gave up on that a long time ago because my body doesn't fit that. Like, I'm like that. Yeah, that I would have loved to do that, but I'm not categorized as what they want to promote. It's like, you can be sexy ginger, but only if you look like this. So something simple as like, I just went on that one promo video and I was just like, oh, this is awesome, but can we like finally get some body representation in here? And it got the most likes out of all the comments, like right away. And so it's like, it's not anything big, but it's those little things where you're just like reminding people that it's like, I get it. This is your project. You can do whatever you want, but just know that there's other spaces where if you branched out and opened your mind enough to what other people think is sexy, not just what you think is sexy, because it's also not about just you. It's understanding that everybody has a different type. And just because you don't find this person attractive doesn't mean other people can't. And so it's opening up that space to say, yes, everybody can like everybody, and like giving that option and opening up those doors instead of gatekeeping and saying, no, just this. So that's kind of those little moments that I make conscious effort to say stuff like that. Or if I'm around friends and they make comments or they say something like self-deprecating or whatever about themselves or about their body and whatnot, I make a conscious effort to go out of my way to kind of say nice things, not just directly stop them and be like, you have to not think like that, but to make nice comments and to say like everybody likes different things, and to bring up these things so that they feel more seen of being like, oh yeah, you're right, like not everybody likes the same thing. Or I bring up my example of like, I like husky guys, I like bigger guys, like everybody has a different, you know, thought. You can't just think everybody likes this one thing because that's what we've been fed this whole time. So it's in those everyday moments that I like to make that kind of effort myself, and just around the people that I'm around of, and like just comment like you said, Matt, everybody likes to be praised, everybody likes to be seen and appreciated. And I do that. I play dodgeball on Mondays, and I do that, you know, on Mondays when people say stuff about themselves like, oh, I'm not good or I'm not this, I'm like, oh, you know, you're new, you're just learning all this. And that can go into the same with being, you know, body positive. It's like, you know, everybody likes a different type. I like these types, and everything's different. So that's how I go about doing my little changes, just kind of like the everyday moments. All right. Well, I think this has been a very, I guess, very spicy. I've really enjoyed this episode. This is a lot of good stuff was said. Do you guys have anything you want to finish off with before we close things down here?
I want to say, just promote our coaching collection, because we have 4 pillars in our coaching collection: confidence, community, relationships, and body positivity. And I think we have over 15 videos in the body positivity pillar that will guide you through this transformation. You know, what are some of the, I've created like unconscious, healing unconscious bias, unpacking sexual conditioning, healing your relationship with your body. There's lots of them. Can you guys think of any ones that you created that were?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, no, I should have thought about this before we came in.
There's one on self-care. There's one on self-care, which is more than just body self-care. Yeah, there's lots of aspects of that. There's a few though.
Yeah. So if you're looking and needing some support, some formal support moving through this transformation, that's a good place to go.
Yeah, we'll definitely have that in the show notes. It's gameandgoingdeeper.com for that if you want to check that out. Michael, you got anything?
No, this has been a great conversation. I'm really happy we had it, and I think it'll be very insightful and hopefully triggering as well.
Yeah, right. It's always triggering. Trust, we get the comments. All right. Well, if you've liked this episode and you've been watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and hit the like button, as well as the little bell. It's going to let you know every Thursday when we put out new episodes. And it really tells YouTube that you like this, and it tells YouTube to send it to more people, because talking about algorithms, it's all about the algorithm. And if you're listening on a podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please go and hit the star rating for us. We would love to get 5 stars, but if you don't believe we deserve it, that's cool. That's fine. And leave a comment for us as well, because we always try and read all of those, and we like getting them, especially on YouTube, and we'll read one out maybe if you leave it for us. So that's it for today. Have the best day ever, everybody. Peace, love, rainbows. Bye.